an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering What We Do in the Shadows. Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot. In this episode, we meet some vampires. We meet one of their keepers, Guillermo. We find out how the household works, and I am very excited about all of it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashley, who commissioned this episode. I have seen the movie. I know a lot of you are probably wondering that right off the top. I only saw it once. It was excellent. It's the kind of thing that I always think I really need to rewatch that, and I just never think of it when I'm thinking of, especially around Halloween, movies that I would like to watch. For some reason, that one doesn't come up. And it deserves to be in the rotation. It's the kind of thing that I really need to work on being a little bit more thoughtful, because I always go to the same few. And I wasn't sure because, I tend to try and avoid finding out as too much about anything that is on television, due to the fact that it may get commissioned or I may decide to cover it someday. So unless I've watched something just for fun and I decide to watch the whole thing, I tend to avoid articles about it or comment sections that talk about it. So I wasn't actually sure starting the show if it was the same cast as the film, or if they were going to have the same characters and recast them with different actors or what. But it is pretty much a totally different cast, totally different characters, totally different situation in the spirit of the movie. A really similar kind of humor and approach to telling the story and depicting the vampires. And I am very, very excited about it. I don't cover a lot of humor because it's hard sometimes when all you can do is repeat the joke and then be and I thought that was funny. And that's everything that you have to say about it. That's not very exciting. But this is a show that's doing something, I never want to say completely original, but it's definitely very different, And I think that there will be plenty to talk about. Also, it's, there, I believe, is this a show that Taika Waititi is involved in? I feel like, you guys are going to have to, I don't like to look up too many things in case I get spoiled. But, his work is beginning to get more recognized as well. And I'm always excited to see that, from creators that I feel are really finding their feet and maybe a little bit underrated or not given the same chances. And I'm excited about that. So, all right, let's begin. We first meet Guillermo. Beautiful setup. I love this so much. So Guillermo is played by, I can't remember his name, Harvey something. And he is in The Magicians. And he plays in that a similar kind of guy who is, he's sort of treated like a doormat a little bit. He thinks that he's better friends with some of the people in power than he actually is. And there's a sense of just pathos to him, So I feel a little bad sometimes when I see an actor getting typecast, especially when they are as young as him. At the same time, he does so well at this. He's really good in this episode. And I was just well, I can't really be mad at it. And the whole thing is that he is the familiar of the main, I say main, but there's really no reason to say main vampire. It's just that he's the first one that we meet. Nandor. Nandor is a delight. I could definitely see him being really frustrating because he is a control freak a little bit. But I deeply relate to that state of being, so I understand. I also really enjoy how much the show... This is something that I feel, a lot of pop culture stuff about vampires has it be that, like, the vampires are completely up to date and they make money in the stock market on, like, investing in, technology stocks, things like that. They are living in sort of state-of-the-art homes a lot of the time. But I really enjoy the conceit of vampires who haven't really caught up with the times. Because honestly, when you think about it, beyond, like, the basics of maybe plumbing, driving a car, maybe having a phone. Do we see any of them having phones this episode? I don't feel like we do. I could see, I'm only 36 years old. I am pretty stuck in my ways already. Like, I can only imagine how much worse it's going to get as I keep aging. And I really think if I lived like 600 years, I would not be trying to learn Facebook. I don't know. Maybe I would be bored enough because I was just alive for so fucking long that I would be like, oh yeah, I want to learn how to do everything. But I don't know. For me, the idea of them being like stuck in their ways a bit, wearing clothing that's like appropriate to the era when they were turned, when they were young, and just sort of not really keeping up with what's happening with the rest of the world. That feels right to me in a way. There's something very sort of self-absorbed about that. And that's a thing with vampires, they are self-absorbed. And especially because we don't really get like much of a sense this episode, although I expect this will probably get addressed later. We don't really hear about how many other communities of vampires there are out there. If there are any others on Staten Island, as it turns out, that's where they are. We know that they have not propagated the way that the Baron expected them to, but we don't really know what that means. Like, he clearly wants to just straight up take over, but there could be more of them than we think, or perhaps they give each other a wide berth because they have to hunt and eat people. So when we meet Guillermo, he is on the verge of celebrating his 10-year anniversary, giving service to Nandor. And he is pretty certain that due to the 10 months, or the 10 years, my bad, sorry Guillermo, don't be mad, he is going to be turned into a vampire as a reward. And it's just a tragic thing because, like, we know as the audience right away, that's not happening, sweetie. Oh, I totally get why you would think that, but also nobody else thinks that's going to happen. I'm really sorry. And by the end, I was sort of wondering if it was going to be the kind of thing where he is told that he will get turned and then something happens to sort of interfere with that. Or, like if there was going to be a big ritual about it, but things kept getting held up. But as it turns out, Nandor just straight up doesn't know how many years he served. He says 2 years of service, and Guillermo has to correct him, which is just the most galling thing. But also, when somebody has lived as long as him, 10 years is going to be hard to keep track of after a point. And he gives him a glitter portrait. I have to be honest, I would love one of those. Are those a thing that you can like commission on Etsy or something? I'm just curious. I'm asking for a friend. It's got a very Gustav Klimt sort of vibe. Anyway, this opening is supposed to be the introduction to the vampire. And instead, it's this long, like, weird, drawn out. He can't open his coffin from the inside. Something is jammed. So Guillermo has to go and get a butter knife to, like, to pry it open. And then he does this like really spooky like rise up to his feet. And I love Guillermo saying, "Very cool, master, very scary." And he just stands there sort of staring at the camera. So the whole thing that they kept from the movie is the conceit that this is a documentary. Somebody's filming this. They are aware the camera is there. They talk to the camera. They have their little like secluded moments where they are honest with the camera, but for sure people are like listening or going to hear about what they said. That's always been one of those things that I'm really curious about. Like, what if you guys were on a show like that where you got a chance to just speak to the camera? Would you behave as if the people around you weren't going to hear what you said? Or would you just tell it like it is and deal with the fallout when and if they hear about it eventually? Because I always thought it was so odd how people on shows like this seemed to act, and I mean like real ones, not obviously this is like a spoof of one, but like real reality shows. And I know that like half of that is generated drama that's not real, but there is a sense sometimes of genuine surprise coming from people who, you know, go into, what do they call it? The booth? I know there's a word for it when you do the like confessional. Is that it? There would be a sense of genuine surprise that like the person they were talking about wound up hearing about what it was that was said. And I was always like, well, duh. Like, what do you think they're not? Like, if you are self-involved enough to be on that kind of show, you are self-involved enough to, at the very least, watch the episode when it comes out. If not, just find out, like, beforehand. Talk to the crew or whoever. Anyway, I just wonder, like, what I guess I could see getting caught up in the moment, feeling like, well, maybe they won't hear about it, and maybe not going completely all out, telling the truth, but saying enough that it was probably a bad idea, and then coming to regret that later. Or maybe you're just kind of like passive aggressive, and you're like, yeah, well, if they hear about it, good, because I kind of want them to know that I feel this way, but I don't feel like having the conversation, which I could also see. Anyway, we have the opening credits, which is a series of portraits of each of the characters and then upgrades to like photos eventually. And we see them like through the ages and the ways that they've changed. And it is really fun because we see for the first time, what's his name? Is it Colin, who's the energy vampire? And we don't know who this is yet. So I was like, well, maybe he's just another vampire, but he's just sort of like not interested in being a vampire the way that they are. Like, you know, maybe he's just more restrained about it or more uncomfortable about it. But then we find out that he's a whole different kind, which we will get to. And I love this so much. Oh my God. So, credits over. Then we have the introductions of Nadja, right? And Laszlo. And it turns out that there is this announcement that Nandor wants to make in this very official capacity in like the drawing room, obviously for the sake of the camera and for the drama of it, even though he doesn't actually know what the message is yet. And I really love the little argument that he has with Laszlo, where eventually Laszlo is just like, oh, fine. You know what? Forget it. Let's just go. I have been Laszlo before, where I'm like, this doesn't make any logical sense. Why are you... We shouldn't do it this way. And then I come to realize I have stood here arguing about it for longer than it would have taken to just do the thing. I have definitely been this person before. And in the middle of this, we get intercut with their like argument, the interview with Nandor about where he, like what time period he grew up in, and the fact that he did a lot of pillaging, a lot of killing. I was a very ferocious soldier in the Ottoman Empire. The way he talks about this is so great. People would say, please don't pillage me. And I would, no, I'm pillaging everyone, you included. I was relentless. They would call me Nandor the Relentless, because I just never relent. Honestly, guys, that is just such a great series of deliveries. That's like this is what fascinates me about comedy, and part of why I just despair of ever having the kind of talent that people like this have, where if I read those lines on a page, they would be funny, but it wouldn't be the same. It's just, and another actor wouldn't be able to convince me. But he does this in such an understated sort of like, yeah, I mean, that's where I went to high school, and I was really good at football, and I wound up majoring in biology, but like instead talking about pillaging and killing and just overall the ruthlessness of the life that he led. Also, I wanted to mention the fact that I couldn't remember, because like I said, I only saw the movie once, and it was a long time ago now. What, like 4 years ago? God. I couldn't remember how they handled the murder of people that they ate. I couldn't remember how many people died in the movie, and the way that they decided to like approach that, because you have to decide where you're going to come down on it. Are you going to show people being murdered, and how will you play that? Or are you going to dance around it and have there be euphemisms, make maybe that part of the joke, or make it like they're trying not to kill people because that draws too much attention? No, what they decided to do was just straight up have these vampires murdering people, and that's just something that they are going to have to cope with. The disposal of bodies, making sure nobody notices the activity here. And I, for one, am pretty into this. Like, I could see the appeal of having it be euphemisms for like the first half of the first season until eventually it's like out there and nobody can ignore it anymore. That could be really funny. I wouldn't dislike that approach. I could see the appeal of wanting your characters to be likable in a more traditional way, and therefore you feel a little bit weird about having them murder over and over again. But I really prefer this because you want the vampires to be threatening in some way. You need to feel that danger. Also, there is a sense of fatigue to the like nice vampire who is just self-loathing and also like trying to behave like they're not what they are. And I know that I, for one, am sort of tired of that whole premise. I understand that that's probably how a lot of us would feel were we put into the position of being vampires, but it's not interesting to read about. And vampires in a story like this where they're so old, they better have gotten over that shit by now. Edward Cullen was like barely 100. Okay, I could see him still struggling with that. But these guys, it's been hundreds and hundreds of years. Like, no, I'm over it. I'm eating people. It's fine. So the fact that we have the number of moments with like gore that we do because we're seeing people get eaten. We have bodies that are being like dragged down into God knows where's. Maybe they have an incinerator or something. We don't actually hear Guillermo. He says that he's responsible for disposing of them, but he doesn't say what he does with them. And I have to assume they get burned. But yeah, I was very pleased because this is a kind of humor, you know, when you decide to do a horror comedy that really speaks to my heart. I'm not a huge fan of horror as a rule because of there's a few types of horror. There's slasher, which depends on the characters being foolish and a premise of like a killer who is superhuman oftentimes. And so those don't really grab me. Like they can be fun to watch as like a background thing, but I don't care about them. Then there is sort of more of a psychological horror, and those absolutely wreck me. Those I can't handle. Like, it's just, my anxiety is just insane. It's through the roof. I couldn't sleep for like a week after I watched Midsummer, for example. That kind of shit, it just gets under my skin. And then there is the comedy horror. And that is a beautiful spot for me personally, because slashers are so ridiculous that I can't take them seriously enough to really enjoy them on their own merits. But horror comedy decides to take those tropes and then make fun of them while telling a story using them. And that is exactly what I need in order to like feel at all invested. And oftentimes the acknowledgement within the story of the characters that the situation is ridiculous really helps me to feel like more affectionate towards those characters because they understand how I'm feeling as a viewer right now. So this completely is just 100% I'm on board. So they go into the drawing room and I love this moment, guys. Another good joke that it's like, it's so corny, but it's so good. Now, before we go into the reading of the letter, I wanted to talk about general hygiene in the cell. Last night, there were all these people down there shouting and screaming, half drunk. And Laszlo says, where did they find the alcohol? And he says, no, they were half drunk. They'd been half drunk. And he goes, oh, please finish a whole victim before moving on to the next one, okay? It's very unhygienic. I think I know who's leaving them down there, but I don't want to say. And I love this, guys, because what they're doing is just having there be a regular old fucking roommate problem. And what Nadja winds up suggesting is that they write on their victims with Sharpie so they know when they started to eat them, and that way they can finish them first. Oh my God. I love this so much, so deeply in my heart. I have been fortunate enough to not live with that many roommates. And when I have, it's been a nightmare. I do not do well sharing space with others. It's not good for anybody involved, me or them. But even living with Owen, the whole finish one before you open another thing comes up constantly because holy shit, this boy has like a complete blind spot when it comes to a packet of cream cheese that's already opened and he just doesn't see it and he opens another one, or a milk that's already open and he opens another, and it drives me bonkers. It's such a stupid thing, and it's one of those things where I get like mad at myself for being as irritated as I am, because I know he's not doing this to be an asshole, you know, but oh God, I get so fucking irritated. So anyway, this is just such a good bit, and this winds up being a moment where we interview Nadja, but in the background, Laszlo and Nandor are fighting with each other, like in midair. This was another thing that I was surprised by, because in comparison, like the movie is very low budget and they managed to do a lot because they're just working off of their story. It doesn't need effects. But I was really surprised throughout this episode how like many effects they use and how generally good it looks. Like, as much as them fighting is silly and floating in midair, it doesn't look like they're actually fighting, and it doesn't, like, that's what works, is the fact that it doesn't look that good, you know? And then the whole transforming to bats, that's great. I am in love with the transforming into bats thing. I think that looks awesome. I love the speed travel. Later on, Laszlo and Nadja are out walking and they attack this couple. And it's just like, they manage to be very careful about when they use these effects. But I think they're just, it's really, really well done. And it was unexpected to me because I kind of thought that this wasn't going to have any at all. And that would be part of the fun, is how like sort of low budget it is. And I have no problem with them deciding to have effects because they clearly know when to bring that up and when to leave it alone. So yeah, she says something about how Laszlo is my big, crazy, wild bear and we love to chase each other around the house. And then we see her flying after him, carrying a sword, yelling, I ought to fucking kill you. And I really love the like relationship between the two of them. It turns out that she turned him, and this is something that I will be honest. When I saw the poster for this show, it's 3 men. Yes, it's 3 men and 1 woman. And I was like, oh, again, like we always have to have a woman outnumbered in every cast like this. And that is what's happening here. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat that, like 100%. It's very tiresome, but here we are. However, I do really like that Nadja is the one who turned Laszlo, instead of it being like, you know, this guy decided he thought this girl was hot, which is sort of a tired thing. They decided to play with that. And also, later on, when she's like stalking this dude, it's a very Edward Cullen sort of thing where she is watching this guy and like stalking him. But with Edward Cullen, because he's a guy, it's just a lot more threatening. You know, not to say that women can't do fucked up stuff, because they can. But by and large, the danger is from men to women. And so if they had done this with the other characters, it really wouldn't have been funny. You would have just been like, am I supposed to find this funny? Because this is kind of fucked up. Also, it's a nice like ode to the whole thing in Dracula, where he has this like, it's not, I don't think it's even actually in the book. I'm trying to remember, but a lot of the like adaptations have there be a suggestion that his like old lover was reincarnated. And so she looks exactly like the woman that he used to be in love with, even though it's been hundreds of years since she died. And so they're sort of doing that here, where there was a guy that she was in love with who she claims that he got beheaded in this way that implies it was in battle. But later on, we find out that they were having sex and she kind of lost it and beheaded him herself. And so she is just missing him. And she sees this guy who does look a lot like the dude in the painting, like granted. And she decides that it must be the same dude. And while it does not seem to be, he's not exactly as afraid of her as he should be. And I'm wondering if he is going to wind up being a vampire in the end after all. So the whole way that she like, she got Laszlo was, first of all, he was the most beautiful man in the village because his whole village was ravaged by leprosy and the plague. She hypnotized him, which he didn't even know at the time. We were about to make love, And then she turned into this hideous, leathery bat thing. She drained me of my blood and giving me the curse of eternal life, and thus making me a bloodthirsty creature of the night. And she's just standing there smiling. Oh, I love this whole thing. So him and Nandor, are fighting with each other. But when she gets up and hisses, immediately Laszlo sits down, which pretty much ends the whole thing. And I just deeply enjoyed that. So that's when she suggests that perhaps they should just write their names on the people with marker. And then they are interrupted by, first we read the note, and it turns out that the Baron is coming for a visit, which they didn't anticipate. It was supposed to be just sort of alarming enough that he had written to them. But now he's coming for a visit. They are super unprepared, and they are pretty certain he is going to be displeased at the fact that they haven't taken over, because he believes that vampires should sort of rule the world. And Nadja and Laszlo both used to have an affair with him, so they both have sort of a thing about seeing him again. I have to say, too, I absolutely love the use of artwork in this show when they're talking about things that happened between them and, the Baron, or between her and Laszlo, or when Nandor's talking about being in the Ottoman Empire. We see a lot of paintings and prints and, that kind of thing. And it's like sometimes they're just meant to be illustrative, and sometimes they are genuinely hilarious. And a lot of them I've seen before because they'll be shared in memes and stuff, because some of these are just ridiculous. And one of the ones, when she's talking about the affair that she had, enjoyed a very intense, very long sexual affair. It was pretty wild. Lots of acrobatic stuff. And when she says lots of acrobatic stuff, we see this, what looks like a block printing of a demon kneeling in front of a woman with his mouth hanging open in shock, looking at her crotch as she pulls her skirts up around her waist. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like this demon is going, "God damn that pussy!" That is 100% what it looks like. And that is actual artwork from an era that I'm just like, what did you mean that to look like when you made that? What was that supposed to be? What? So yeah, then we have the excellent moment where Laszlo says basically the same thing, and we get to see some other awkward artwork. So as they're panicking about this, they're deciding how they want to handle picking him up from the airport, I guess, or is it on the boat? I think he's brought by boat. But she wants to get a carriage pulled by black alligators, and they have to settle for a black van. Also, Guillermo's going to get 2 virgins by tomorrow evening, and he does get a couple of people from his LARPing group. And I really want to know, when he does this, does nobody wonder... does nobody notice that he's, asked people to come over and they never come back? I feel like this is going to start to add up to people. So they are talking about what to do here. And Laszlo says, should we tell Colin Robinson? And Nadja says, that's a terrible idea. He'll ruin the evening. And they turn around and here's Colin Robinson. He's standing there going, what would ruin the evening? So guys, let's talk about Colin. I'm so excited about this. I don't think the concept of an energy vampire was in the film. Am I right? This is one of my favorite things because it is so absolutely 100% a real thing. It just is. Maybe they don't live forever using that energy, but I have to assume they live a little longer on it. I don't think it hurts. I'll say that. How's that? You guys, my grandmother was an energy vampire, and being around her, I loved her to death. And she was a very inspiring person in some ways. She's part of where I get my sense of aesthetic, my passion for holidays and cooking. But also, a bitch was exhausting. And she was just she was, first of all, extremely negative. So there are different types of energy vampire. And some of them are like Colin, where it just feels like they are so boring and bring so little like passion to things that you are forced to give more of yourself to keep things going in the conversation, and that winds up tapping you out, and you don't really notice it at the time. Because I am such an animated person, often find myself putting extra into conversations in order to sort of like fill in what feels like dead air to me, or make things like a little bit more quick moving in the conversation and thus less awkward. And I see that with him a little bit, but there's also obviously the whole like literal part going on. Then there's the type of energy vampire that is emotional. These are people who always have some drama going on. And it's sometimes, oh my God, my boyfriend. Oh my God, my girlfriend. It's sometimes drama with my roommates. Oh my God, these people at work. Oh my God. And there's a difference between people who are like having a bad day in one event and people who just are like constantly living in that state all the time. And, or it can be people who are like, I had a hypochondriac mother-in-law, and she just, every time we talked, there was a new thing that was ailing her. And it was just so difficult because anytime we got together, we didn't really get to talk about what was going on with us or talk to other people. It was always all about her and how terrible life was for her right now. And it just gets so like, what are you supposed to even say after a point, But they just want your pity. They want your contribution because they often ask for advice, but they never take it. So they're just demanding labor of you, but they don't do anything with it, or they just sort of seem to like feed on your involvement without changing anything about how they're approaching the problem. And it's so easy when you're a person like me, who I tend to be more of like a problem solver type. When you tell me something that's going on with you, I automatically go into like, how do I solve this mode? Which isn't always what people want. A lot of times folks just want to vent, but I am very bad about trying to like create a solution. And that's sometimes not appropriate. But because I am like that, that kind of energy vampire gets me a lot, because it's the sort of thing where I mistake the fact that they're telling me for like a good faith sort of conversation. And it takes a long time before I realize that they don't actually intend to change anything about how they live. And the last one is, well, it's sort of a combo. I was going to say the last one is the negativity or the positivity vampire. Somebody who manages to like pull the good or the positive out of any situation and make it just depressing and gloomy. That person is sort of another face of a troll. And that's somebody who's like, on the internet, just making like shitty comments or bad faith arguments, trying to get you to wear yourself out arguing with them. They have no intention of changing their point of view. They have no actual interest in a dialogue where they absorb the information that you're giving them. They want you to invest your time because it amuses them. And I, for one, fall for that shit way too fucking much. It's very, very bad. I'm banned on Facebook right now due to that, because I fell for that shit. My own fault. I should have learned by now, but I haven't learned. I am better, and I don't fall for it as often, but I still fall for it. So anyway, this introduction of Colin, this is the best, and I'm super excited about this edition because he is a wonderful foil to these vampires. It's like we're going to have these three people who literally just slaughter other human beings and are covered in blood and have bodies that they have to get rid of. And they are going to be less terrifying to us than Colin, who looks like a fucking serial killer, first of all. He just does. Like, he looks like he could be a pedophile or a serial killer or both. And he doesn't seem to kill people. It's just that he, like, sips from them and then walks away. And they seem like they're able to replenish that energy. And yet what he does seems so much more upsetting and damaging. And I just really, really enjoy this. This is my office, also known as the hunting ground. And energy vampires drain people's energy merely by talking to them. The regular budget, no thanks. We either bore you with a long conversation, or we, oh my God, and we see this one guy keeling over and then him following somebody else to the bathroom. Or we enrage you and we watch him sharpening this pencil in this really irritating way while looking around at everybody else in the office with this like, come on, who's upset? Who's angry? We're the most common type of vampire. We are daywalkers, not affected by the sun. And we are the only kind of vampire that can drain another vampire's energy. So in this scene, he interrupts their conversation that they were having without him. And he is irritated at the fact that he wasn't included in the house meeting. And so he is looking around at all of them and his eyes go like white as he leaves. And we see Nadja like slump over on the couch. Everybody is just really affected by this. And as he leaves, Laszlo says, the power grows stronger in him by the night. And I was just like, this is a real bad sitch, guys. I don't like this. Like, he's living with them. It has to be for a reason. Like, why is he sharing the house with real vampires? Is this adding a veneer of like respectability to their reputation? How much do other people notice this house? This is all stuff that I can't wait because I just think the show, this is the exact sort of thing that they will explore. So anyway, I love the introduction of this character and the whole, like I said, the foil of him as just deeply unlikable and genuinely like threatening in a way that these other characters who should be more threatening are not. It's just perfect. It truly is. So we see Guillermo doing his like chores around the house as we hear about what it was like when he was a kid and how he saw Antonio Banderas as like a Hispanic vampire. And that was a major moment for him. And he just idolized vampires from then on. And he's pretty certain that he is going to be turned into a vampire tonight. And then we see him getting his friends from the LARP group to agree to come over that night. Then we have the scene with Nadja and Laszlo. And they walk by this couple who like mocks them for what they're wearing. And they decide that they are going to eat them. I thought they would get both of them. I don't know if they go back and get the girl, but they grab the guy and just carry him straight up into the air so that she turns around and he's already gone. And then there's this amazing moment where they're like in the midair eating him, I guess. And all of this blood just pours down from the sky onto her. And she just seems to not know what to make of it, which you wouldn't. And damn, That's cold-blooded. They don't even like drag him behind a tree. They literally just fly straight up into the air and eat him in midair. That really did not take very long either. Like, wow. So this is when he says to Naja, I'm very much in the mood for some sexual intercourse. And she says, next to the public toilet? And he says, yeah, but let me go home and get cleaned up and then we can do it. And she says, I'm going to walk home. And he wants to know why the hell she would do that when you could just turn into a bat and fly, which is what he does a moment later. But we find out that part of the reason why is because she is stalking that guy. This is followed by a great scene with Nandor at the grocery store getting supplies for the visit from the Baron. And he is just wearing his big cape. And he is buying creepy paper, which is actually crepe paper to decorate the house with. And buying glitter to put on his skin so that it can be like Twilight. Which he later does come to regret. I really enjoyed this a lot. And also the moment where Guillermo is holding up he has like I think skeleton meant for like a Halloween decoration, like a paper skeleton, and he holds it up and Nandor just flicks his fingers and it lights on fire in the middle of the store. I fucking loved that. I think I liked that so much because that's not like an ability that vampires are supposed to have, right? Where they can just light things on fire spontaneously. But I am definitely here for the development of vampire powers and for us to find out that they can do new and exciting things that we didn't know they could do before, you know? So then we hear Nandor talking about how Guillermo can be a little bit too familiar, that he works really hard, but he's not great at it. And it turns out that Guillermo's standing right there in the room when this is all happening. It all becomes more and more clear that Guillermo is not going to be turned into a vampire, dude. Like, he is not interested in having you around like that. Oh God. And then when Nandor wants Guillermo to stab the dude, at the checkout, because he, I think, said something about how it's a lot of glitter. That was literally all this dude said. And Nandor was like, oh, you want to comment on how much glitter I'm getting? Which, to be perfectly honest, is a mood. I have been a cashier at a couple places. And let me tell you, one thing you don't fucking do is make little petty judgmental comments about the shit people are buying. Okay? You can be like, oh my God, this is so cute, which was a thing that I frequently said at Target because people would buy stuff that I didn't know was in stock yet. And I would be like, which aisle was this? And I would go get it on my break. But you don't do the like, wow, are you having a party? That kind of comment when somebody's buying a bunch of soda. Or I can't remember. There was something that somebody said to me one time where I was like, what does that even mean? But just don't, guys. Just don't do it. You may think you're being subtle. You're not. They know what you're really saying. And you may think that it's a fairly harmless comment. I promise you, that person will like not forget what you said for like 6 months. They will think about it every week, at least once, because they're going to be like, what the fuck was that? Just don't do it. So anyway, then we go to the scene with Naja stalking this dude. We see him like in his apartment jerking off, and she has taken a photo of him with like an old-fashioned camera with a flash, which I just found so hilarious. And this is when she says, my old flame Gregor, he got decapitated in battle. Nope, evidently not. Apparently she decapitated him. And she says that she doesn't think she ever got over him, even when she met Laszlo. She's still hung up on him. So later on, we see her approach this dude, and she is like super weird and aggressive and talking about like, do you remember when such and such? And he does not remember, but evidently either she's attractive enough that he doesn't care, he's stupid enough that he's not picking up on what she's like saying or doing, or he is hypnotized, which we know she can do and is a thing. But either way, he's very much like going with it. And I was just sort of impressed and also like, what, guy, run away. What's happening? So then we have the unboxing of the Baron. And this is all preceded by the LARPers who have come to the house and are immediately asked if they're virgins. I was kind of hoping that it would turn out that they were not, because it's such a trope for like nerds to be virgins, and like depending on the kind of nerd you are, it's not true. Nerds, because they like form sort of close groups, it can be a very sort of incestuous thing where everybody involved in that group winds up hooking up eventually with every other person. Sort of like in like a drama club or band camp kind of thing, you know? But it does seem like they are virgins. And I love when Guillermo opens one of the doors, because he's like trying to give them a place that they can like wait and be locked in. And the girl asks, are they a vampire LARP group? And I'm like, yeah, why didn't you just say that? That feels like it would be a lot more believable. He opens the door, and there is one person standing up and like staring in this sort of vacant way. And then there's a guy on the ground that's sort of like scrambling towards the door, crawling. I didn't see any blood, which I was surprised by, but they're obviously in great distress and being kept against their will. And Guillermo closes the door very quickly. We take our LARPing very seriously. That was just an example. I wanted you to see that. Yeah. Oh my God. I loved this. So the unveiling of the Baron. I don't know who the actor is playing this dude, but this must have been so much fun. They must be very skinny. Like, he has a sort of look to him like the, what do you call it? The Night's King in Game of Thrones, because you have to be super skinny in order to wear the sort of suit that he's got on, where his ribs sort of protrude as if his body is desiccated. And it's just really, it must be a lot of fun to do this. Kyle's in the chat. Doug Jones, he's in a bunch of Del Toro films. He was the fish man in Shape of Water. He's always playing skinny monster freaks. I never saw Shape of Water. Yeah, this was really fun to watch. The way that he comes out, he's so sort of like sinuous, despite the fact that he's like really, he looks like he should creak and that there should be like puffs of dust coming off him. Ashley says, I think he was also one of the gentlemen in Buffy. That's fun. And he comes out of the coffin and looks at, I think her name was June, this older woman who's just sort of, I think she's a familiar, but she doesn't get treated the way that Guillermo does in terms of interaction on camera. And he just turns and looks at her and grabs her and kills her. And nobody was expecting him to behave this way. First of all, she's a familiar, so I think it's just etiquette that she should be off limits. Like, he's above etiquette, as it turns out, but they all sort of seem to assume that she'd be safe. And clearly Guillermo also thought that she would be safe, because he sees her get eaten and he looks at the camera like, I did not think that was an option, and now I'm a little concerned. As it turns out, the Baron goes back to sleep pretty quickly. There's only a little bit of awake time as he begins to grab a bite to eat, and then take a nap again, which I can't really be mad at. And he does the speech about how they really should have taken over by now. What are they even doing if it isn't, ruling these fucking human beings? This is when we find out that they are on Staten Island. And this whole bit, I love Laszlo just like mocking the fact that they're meeting the Baron in the same room as a Stairmaster, that there is crepe paper hung up. He's just like, this should have been human skin, obviously. Oh my God, I deeply apologize. This is, I really appreciate this because honestly, as much as Laszlo is correct, Nandor's the one who did all the footwork, sir. He's the one who figured it all out. You could have stepped in and done something, but you didn't. You just went out and ate people. So, you get what you get. So the Baron goes back to sleep. And they are all deeply relieved for the moment, but also really worried because he's definitely going to wake up and he definitely is still going to have a problem with the way that they've been managing things. And at the least, when this is over, Nandor's like, well, we've got those virgins. Thank God. We can go and have a snack. And they go downstairs, and when the door is opened, Colin is there already. And he is talking to them about, washing a car and whatever. He is draining them of energy. And Nandor says, oh, God, they have no nutritional value now. And I'm wondering, as I said before, do they replenish their energy? Is this a permanent thing? Or is this something that can, if they hold them here in this room, will the vampires be able to come back in a few hours and feed on them and it's fine? Or how does this work? But yeah, the two of them are slumped over on the couch. And Colin walks out of there with this look on his face as his eyes turn white again, which is obviously really, really freaky looking, and I hate it. So this is when Nandor gives Guillermo his glitter portrait. I feel so sad for poor Guillermo. He really thinks that he's going to get turned. The only thing that I didn't like about this scene is the fact that Nandor seems completely oblivious to the fact that Guillermo wants to be turned and that he unbuttoned his collar and turned his neck open to I really wanted there to be at the very least a moment in the confessional where Nandor's yeah, I know he wanted to be a vampire, but that's super duper not happening. It's not even addressed. He doesn't even say anything about it. And I was just how can you not how can you not see that was what he was doing right there? But evidently he doesn't. He gives him this glitter portrait, and the portrait is of a baby Guillermo from that picture that he showed us when he was a kid at Halloween. It's not even himself now. So then we have a really great moment after this massive disappointment that he has suffered, where he goes over to the window and he pulls back the curtain. He's just adjusting it, but then he sees the sunlight coming in and he sort of opens the curtain extra in order to it's sort of he's determining whether or not he could kill Nandor, thinking about maybe he just should. And then from inside the coffin, Nandor says, "Good night, Guillermo." And he sort of loses his nerve and drops the curtain. And that is the end of the episode. So yeah, this was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I am super curious, what the rest of the episodes are going to be like. I'm hoping it's going to be the sort of, questions that I was asking. And I don't know what they're going to do about the Baron, because I assume that he's going to want to just go out there and either kill a bunch of people or turn a bunch of people, which is, both. And I feel like he's not going to be super easy to manage, but also he just like stepped out and ate somebody and then went right back to sleep. So maybe it's just going to be little tiny short spurts of violence. I don't know, but that's it. So I am going to wrap this up. Thank you again very much to Ashley who commissioned this episode. And I hope you guys are enjoying it. And I will be seeing you. Let's see. When's the next one? Tuesday, March 30th. So next week, a week from today, so for the next episode. So that's fun. All right, guys, I will see you then. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.